All right. Thank you so much, John. I am very, very excited to be here with you today. In case you don't know me, I'm always excited, so I guess that's not a surprise. I want to talk to you today about Cobalt Education. Thank you, Pat, for that lovely introduction to this topic. I want to point out I have only 20 minutes to convince you, and maybe a little less thanks to Pat's wonderful stand-up comedy. But I have only 20 minutes to convince you that what we are dealing with when it comes to COBOL skills is much more than needing to teach students how to program in COBOL. I know, I'm not going to talk about the COBOL skills gap because you're all mainframers, you already know that. We don't need to waste time. But we have a lot that we really need to talk about that we really haven't been. We've only been dipping our toes into it, so let's spend our time focusing on that, shall we? But first I want to give a big thank you. Oh, this is an old version of the chart. Sorry about that. Oh no, this is the right version. Okay. Thank you to some of these organizations that have really been doing a lot in this space. So I want to start with thanking IBM, who has a massive, massive program. I love you guys. You all do a lot in the COBOL space. Contributed the COBOL programming course and donated it to the Open Mainframe Project, Master the Mainframe, now called Z-Explore, the Apprenticeship Program, so much that IBM is doing in this space. It's really an amazing, amazing program that they have there. I'm also a huge fan of the program at Broadcom. Broadcom has an apprenticeship program. It's quite generous if you think about it. They are paying salaries to people that otherwise wouldn't have this access to this education so that they can learn and then make them available to other companies to hire. It's really quite a generous program. And then of course I'd be remiss if I didn't point out my own company, Micro Focus. We have a Cobalt Education program as well. We have a course that's available and we make the software available to hundreds of universities around the world. I'm at Open Mainframe Project, so let's point out some of the things that this organization is doing to address the COBOL skills gap. Big thank you to the COBOL programming course. As I mentioned, IBM funded an academic to build the initial version of that and donated it to the Open Mainframe Project. That project is now going on and continuing to update, keep it current, add new technologies. This course has become the foundation of what most people are using to teach new generations as well as their own employees. Even us in Micro Focus have been leveraging this material to train our employees in Micro Focus. The COBOL working group that I have the privilege of being a member of is missioned with one of those areas that I think are really, really important that's beyond learning the programming language. And that is countering the misinformation and the perception. No COBOL programming course is going to be successful if we don't address that problem. I hope you all agree. We have no option, but we have to make sure that these future students and the world in which they are working, those colleagues that they start their first job with, understand the value of COBOL. And that is the mission of the COBOL working group. And as was announced, right? Yes, announced yesterday, they are launching a new research project. You all have an opportunity to be sponsors for that. I hope your companies will consider doing so because it's that data and the marketing and the promotional campaigns behind it that are going to make a difference in the COBOL skills gap. I'm not kidding here, right? This is a very direct connection between the perception and then the skills. We cannot solve this problem without some of that. And the Open Mainframe Education Project launched pretty recently. It's not directly related to COBOL, but it is related to skills and creating a repository, an open source way of sharing educational materials, some of which is related to COBOL. That is going to accelerate the types of educational materials we have available. Okay, so we've done a lot already. Now what? What's the next big thing? All right? So let's take a deep breath, congratulate ourselves. We've done so much. We're doing a fantastic job. Okay, now there's lots more to do. Let's dive in. First thing, let's reach diverse communities. We've already started some of that. There's much more that we can do. I'm working with Tech Channel to do this Women of COBOL webinar series. The purpose of this is to highlight women already engaged in COBOL in a wide variety of roles. It might be marketing, it might be development, it might be management, it might be modernization. Highlight those women for what they know and what they're contributing, and they just happen to be women. So it's not about what is it like to be a woman, it's about what is it like to be a COBOL programmer. This latest episode, it just went up, I guess, a week or two ago. I interviewed Maggie Hall of Washington University of Vienna and Laura Sherwin of Ensono. And they were talking about how COBOL changes lives. Maggie's program is taking the unhoused, teaching them COBOL, as well as life skills necessary when you go from a situation like that without having a home. It's a difficult situation. So they are training them in the skills as well as the soft skills necessary and then getting them jobs. It's an NSF-funded program that she's leading there. And Laura's at Ensono has an apprenticeship program, very similar to the one that Broadcom and IBM are doing. So we have more of these apprenticeship programs going on where you have first generation students or people that otherwise wouldn't have access to education of this type. This is a huge opportunity for us in closing the COBOL skills gap. When I would talk to large ranked university and top level students, that unconscious bias, that perception that COBOL is not cool, feeds into the fact that they already feel like they have a tremendous number of opportunities. Why would I engage with COBOL when I could do blockchain or whatever they think is cool for the day, right? But these students are much more open to our message. They're not looking to be the next Steve Jobs. They're looking to be employed. They're looking to make a difference. This is where we find our future. Other thing that we need to start talking about. We've been teaching basic programming skills, but COBOL can do so much more. There's a lot going on in the COBOL space. It's very much a modern language with all of these new tricks that we have on the plate. We need to start integrating some of that newer technology into our curriculum. First of all, because we need those young people to go into our organizations and innovate, deliver new value for those organizations. So we need to arm them with the skills to do so, especially when you're dealing with probably a fair number of current COBOL programmers that are quiet quitting. They're not out there learning the new technology. They don't feel like they need to. They don't feel valued. We already heard from Cynthia how much we have in common with the neurodiversity space in that regard. These young people are going to bring in energy to these organizations, bring us all forward. We need to arm them with the skills to do so. We need to arm them with understanding what COBOL really can do today. There's another area we need to consider. A lot of what we've been focusing on is ZOS, but we need to look beyond that. And I found this chart from the Micro Focus Cobalt Survey to be very, very interesting. And you can see that ZOS does have the vast majority of COBOL, but it's not even half. Windows has 31% of all of the COBOL in the world. Why aren't we teaching COBOL on Windows as well? We should be. We should be showing them the range of opportunities for COBOL. There's a lot of COBOL code in the world that needs to be modernized and maintained. It's not just ZOS. ZOS is the largest single platform, but it's not even all of it. Now, if you're adding these numbers, because I know you are, because I know how you people are, it adds up to more than 100%. And that's because 58% of the people replying to our survey have COBOL in more than one platform. So it's very likely that they'll need to be maintaining COBOL on ZOS and Windows and cloud and Linux and other mainframe servers. We need to be able to prepare our next generation to maintain the full range of what we have to support in this world. So the COBOL working group is moving on to the next stage. It's missioned to open the minds to the truth about COBOL. So we started with some thought leadership articles. We sponsored some mentorship programs, and we ran our own survey as a COBOL working group, which turned out to be a very interesting comparison to the Vanson Bourne survey sponsored by Micro Focus. They kind of supported each other, that COBOL is growing, right? So we've already done some great work there, but now we need to move to the next level. And the plan is to move to the next level with Linux Foundation supported research. And what's really interesting, when we had a conversation with the research arm of the Linux Foundation, they said, well, what is it you're ultimately trying to accomplish with these surveys? Okay, it's interesting. There's 800 billion lines of COBOL code in the world, and that's more than there was the last time a survey was done 10 years ago. That's a very interesting fact. Now what? Now what is, why doesn't anybody know this? How do we get them to care? So this next round of survey is going to really understand not just the current state, but where people are moving forward in the future, and how do we convince them that that future is possible. So there's a couple of elements of this survey that I think we can all benefit from. I hope you will all join me in finding sponsors because this research is not free. It is significant research with interviews with real people, not just people typing into a SurveyMonkey form, right? This is top-notch research that we need to do in order to solve our COBOL skills gap. Remember, I already drew that line for you. The perception is directly impacting our ability to create a pipeline of talent. This is an important part of COBOL skills. The mentorship program, you heard that fabulous keynote just a little while ago. Huge fan of this program. As I said, the COBOL working group had funded or sponsored a couple of projects already. We sponsored a project to port the COBOL programming course onto a laptop-based version in direct response to the fact that many students in countries such as India, Brazil, Nigeria did not have access to the internet reliably from home when they were under quarantine. So we made a version of that course that could be done without internet access. It was a great step. The other thing we did was we had a student demonstrate various modernization activities that you could do on existing COBOL applications. So let's think about this. You're a student, graduate from college, you've learned COBOL, you're ready to start your first COBOL job. Are they going to say, all right, here's the spec, write a brand new COBOL program? I don't think so. It's not what's going to happen. They're going to be asked to modify what's already in place. They're going to be asked to maintain, blah, 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 who wants that job? I don't. And they're going to be asked to modernize. They're going to be asked to add in APIs. They're going to be asked to convert it into microservices. They're going to be asked to add whole new functions without breaking what already exists. They may be asked to move it to another server, to another platform. There's a wide variety of activities that need to be done on those COBOL applications. And I argue, first, that that is an essential skill. It is not being taught. It's not being taught by anyone. I haven't found a single university teaching it. I haven't found a single employer teaching it. No one is teaching those modernization skills today. They need to. They're unique skills. How do people learn to modernize? You just do it, and we expect people to figure it out. I don't think that's good enough. I think that we as a community need to teach the next generation how to make the current COBOL applications meet the modern needs of the business. We need to teach them those techniques and methods to move us all forward. The mentorship program last summer, we sponsored a student to demonstrate just a few of those modernization techniques. and he blogged about it all along the way. If you haven't read those blogs, I highly encourage you to do so. They're still available on the Open Mainframe Project's blog site, but they're a year old. I love saying, you know, you think you can't do anything with your COBOL besides get off of it? Well, you can modernize it. If a student can do it, certainly you can. It's not that hard. It's entirely possible. We just have to teach people how. So I think that this is the next step for us in the mentorship program, is to get more students to create more content about how to modernize. It's the next step for the courses that we deliver. And it's the next step for me. So as was announced yesterday, I've bitten off a giant bite of things, a project. And that is this modernization working group. The goal of the working group is to get us all together, not just all of us mainframers, all of us in IT. What company has only a mainframe today? Nobody. It has to integrate across the entire IT stack. And we struggle right now because even the companies that we're working with, the end customers, the organizations, they think of it as divided. There's a wall in between. There's the mainframe team over here doing their thing with their crazy EBCDIC and all of that. And then there's everybody else over on this side with the real technology, right? That's no way to run a business, in my opinion. All of it works together to serve the needs of the business, and all of it should be integrated without prejudice, without borders, without enemies. And what I'm trying to accomplish with this working group is to create a repository where we can all come together and agree, first of all, on the definition of what modernization means, and define it in a way that's about the outcomes and not the things that you're doing. So the definition of modernization is not going to be modernizing in place, hybrid cloud, moving off. Those are things you do to accomplish a goal. The definition of modernization is going to be something about meeting the current needs of the business with adaptability and flexibility, whatever, right? That's for the community to define. We're going to get together and try to find that common ground where we can all work together to drive the entire IT stack forward in a way that respects and values the unique attributes of everything in that stack. So, how does this fit with COBOL? This working group is going to have a number of topics, and I'm sure that one of those topics is going to be COBOL. Those applications absolutely have been neglected in many organizations, not all. Thank you to those of you that keep your COBOL applications current. I love you. But in many organizations, those applications have been neglected. And we need to build a repository of educational materials that show organizations how they can move those applications forward to meet the modern needs of their business. And this will be an industry-wide agreed set of thought leadership and educational materials. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but what I hope you will see is that we are at the beginning of a bright new future when we come together and we focus on the big picture. The programming language itself was only the first step. The journey is what's ahead of us. Thank you.